Pach, to cook. Actually, cooked, in the sense of mature, is pakwa, which becomes in modern Indian languages pakka. But actually it's from Sanskrit pakwa, which means cooked in the sense of ripe. It also means ripe or mature, something which has come to the right point. So, equality. It's really all over the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna, for example, when he responds to Arjuna's question at the beginning of chapter 12 about who is better, the personalists or the impersonalists, and of course Krishna says the personalists are higher. And then he gives the consolation prize to the impersonalists. He says, they also eventually attain me, but if sarva bhuta hite rata, if they are dedicated to the welfare of all living beings. So this equality is a very big point. Krishna at one point says that yoga is defined as equality. Samatwang yoga uchyate. Yoga is defined as equality. Actually, a linguistic note on the word equality. The T at the end of equal, a T is Sanskrit. In this case, twam. So, equality. Yoga is defined as equality. So now at the same time, and this is very interesting tension in Bhagavad Gita, you have this strong emphasis on equal vision, seeing everyone equally. At the same time, Krishna describes certain God-given hierarchies. For example, Krishna says, Chatur Varnya Maya Srishtam, that I have created this system of 4 Varnas, which is, of course, hierarchical. Krishna says in that famous verse, Tadvidhi Pranipatena, that one, literally, Tadvidhi, know this spiritual knowledge, learn this spiritual knowledge. Pranipatena, by submission. Pranipata is a very interesting word. It actually physically describes the act of submission, because pra means forward, ni means down, and pat means falling. So it actually describes the motion of bowing to someone. Pranipata. And here, of course, it's translated submission. So Krishna says, Tadvidhi. Vidhi is just the imperative. No, the same root as the word Veda. And we actually have that in English still, in words like wit, which means intelligence. It's just Sanskrit vit. So, anyway, that's enough linguistics. But, so tadvidhi pranipatena pariprasnena. Pari in Sanskrit is Greek peri, like perimeter, perimeter, Sanskrit parimatra. And pari means around. So it's used as a prefix to indicate something which is complete, which is thorough. In other words, covering all points, all around. So pariprashna means thorough questioning. Tadvidhi pranipatena pariprasnena. So one should submit, one should thoroughly question to get a clear understanding, and sevaya, and by service. And then Krishna says, upadekshanti, they will instruct. The same word as upadesha. Upadeshamrita, this is just the verb. Upadekshanti, they will instruct. Upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas. It's very interesting how Krishna juxtaposes these two words, jnanam and jnaninas. He's making a strong point just by the syntax, just by the word order. And Krishna says that they will teach knowledge who have knowledge. It's a simple point, but it's a strong point. Those who have knowledge, knowledge will teach. In other words, if you don't have knowledge, you're not going to teach knowledge. So, upadekshanti te jnanam jnaniyas tattvadarshina. And tattvadarshina, seers of the truth. Even the word here for seer is an interesting word, tattva. There are various words in Sanskrit that mean truth. And, for example, satyam, as in the motto of India, satyameva jayate, that truth alone wins out. Satyameva jayate. So if you just mean that something is true and not false, like tell the truth, then the word would be satya. And there's another word for truth in Sanskrit, rita, as in ritadvaja, which means sort of like a moral cosmic truth of the universe. Actually, it's a word which, anyway, so Arjuna uses that word in the Gita when he says, sarvam etad ritang manye, that I consider all that you told me to be truth. So the word tattva means truth, but in a special sense. which I'll explain. The word tat in Sanskrit, if you just add an H, it means, it's English, that. And that is a demonstrative pronoun, which means that. It's pointing out a real thing. And so therefore, in this very sophisticated Vedic culture, the word tat comes to mean a real, something which is a real object that can be demonstrated. Because it's that. And then if you add twa, it means like the state of being that, or thatness. So therefore, tattva comes to mean a fundamental real thing. And that's why it's used, for example, as in jiva tattva. So jiva tattva means the jiva as a fundamental category of real things. Or Vishnu tattva, or Prakriti tattva. So, tattvadarshi, to be tattvadarshi, in that sense, means one who sees the fundamental categories of real things. In other words, you see the jiva, you see Vishnu or God, and you see Prakriti. You actually understand these things. And to make these proper distinctions, jiva, Vishnu, Prakriti, if you can make those proper distinctions, the word for distinction in Sanskrit is vishesha. So someone who cannot make these proper distinctions, in other words, one who cannot see tattva is near vishesha, which is the word Prabhupada placed in his pranam mantra. So, for example, if one confuses jiva and Vishnu, then you don't understand tattva. If you confuse Vishnu and Prakriti, if you think that Krishna's body is material, again, it's confusing tattva. Or if you think that the jiva is the body, that's another confusion of tattva. So therefore, when Krishna says they will teach you knowledge, those who have knowledge, those who have actually seen tattva. Interestingly, in the third canto of the Bhagavatam, when Devahuti asks her son Kapila to explain Sankhya, and she says, Kati Tattvani, how many tattvas are there? Which means how many real fundamental objects are there in nature. And of course, in this case, we're in a sense talking about sub-tattvas like earth, water, fire, and so on, which can be summarized as Prakriti or broken down into smaller units. But so Tattvadarshi means to see all the fundamental truths and to get them right. Now, so speaking of fundamental truth, I brought up this verse because there's clearly a hierarchy between a guru and disciple. One is teaching and one is learning. There's also a hierarchy between parents and children, which Krishna refers to in the Gita. When he says to, Arjuna in the 11th chapter, when he sees universal form, he says to Krishna, just as parents tolerate what their children do, so you should tolerate what I have done. So, because it's understood that there's a hierarchy. And there's also anyway, there are various hierarchies in the Bhagavad Gita. So the point I'm making is that there's this tension between hierarchy and equality. And tensions are not necessarily conflicts. Tensions can be very creative. For example, the pre-Socratic philosopher Heraclitus said that if you look at a bow, like in shooting arrows, if you look at a bow which is strung, the bow appears to be at rest, but actually there's a tension between the two ends of the bow, and it's precisely that tension which gives the power to the arrow. So, in that sense, we who are trying to develop a spiritual movement and trying to fulfill Prabhupada's vision for what a spiritual movement should be, both internally in terms of the quality of our movement and externally in terms of the success of our movement, we have to understand the proper relationship between equality and hierarchy. And the reason I'm discussing all this is because Krishna says, this verse says in the first line, that the parents are the friends of the children. So here you have the people clearly in the higher position. Parents are in a higher position, and yet they are the friends of the children. They are the real well-wishers. Prabhupada signed all his letters, your ever well-wisher. And the word in Sanskrit that Prabhupada translated as well-wisher is suhrit, which literally means good-hearted. It literally means good-hearted. Actually, Suhrid, it's just like English. Su in Sanskrit means good, and it came into English through Greek as eu. EU, like eugenics, good breeding, euphonic, good sound, and so on. So that you in English, which means good, is just Sanskrit Su. And of course, Hrid is heart. So Suhrid literally means good-hearted, to have a good heart towards someone. And Prabhupada translated that as well-wisher. So it's fair to say, I believe, that in general, the hierarchy among jivas refers to the body. And because what else does Krishna mean when he says vidya vinaya sampanne, brahmane, that you have all these different kinds of bodies, the highest human body, the lowest human body, animals, including the dog, who was probably never like the national mammal of India. So you have this whole variety of human body, a whole variety of bodies, and yet pandita samadarshana. It is the pandita, it is the wise that see them as equal. Krishna says, unless you see all living beings as equal, you cannot achieve the highest bhakti. Krishna says, I see things that way. And so it is fair to say that the equality ultimately refers to the soul. Because as we all know, and certainly as Krishna knows, bodies are different. There are higher and lower bodies. For example, you have a common term in the Bhagavatam, avaraja, which means inferior birth. And Krishna even refers in one Gita verse in chapter 9 to papa joniya, those who come from a papa yoni, a sinful womb. So it's well known that there's hierarchy, and yet an advanced Vaishnava sees beyond this hierarchy. In that sense, one test of a spiritual movement is that while maintaining necessary hierarchies, such as parents and children, teachers and students, and so on, while maintaining these God-given hierarchies, the mood, the atmosphere within the society is of equality. In fact, the external hierarchy facilitates the equality. For example, in this class, there are men and women. And because we accept Dharma, we all accept what is proper behavior between men and women. Therefore, we have the luxury, we have the freedom to all gather together as one spiritual family and discuss Shastra. Or between, so let's say between guru and disciple, or parents and children, let's take the position of guru. The qualification of a guru, I would say, a very basic qualification of guru is precisely not to think that you're better than other people. And of course, it doesn't mean we abolish the hierarchy. There is a natural hierarchy. There's an etiquette. There's a formality which is maintained. But at the same time, if the guru is advanced in Krishna consciousness, then the guru sees that beyond the formalities, we are actually all equal as souls. Whatever kind of body we have, whether it's a man's body or a woman's body, or a Shudra or a Brahman or student or teacher, that yes, we maintain formalities and etiquette in this world, and yet ultimately we're all equal. And it's that atmosphere, it's that that cultural atmosphere of equality, of friendship, which makes the hierarchy tolerable. Because, if you're working under a boss, or if you're in some situation where someone is in charge of you, and that person does not see the underlying equality, and does not treat you with that love and kindness with which you treat someone with whom you have profound empathy, someone you actually identify with despite the external hierarchy, then hierarchy simply becomes an instrument of oppression, and that's exactly what happened in the history of the world. That's, in fact, Prabhupada states this very explicitly when he says in connection with the cursing of Parikshit that what really brought on Kali Yuga was the arrogance of Brahmanas. And that arrogance may manifest, for example, in the attitude of, we don't care what the world likes or doesn't like, take it or leave it. This is what we're offering. I mean, obviously, we don't compromise what we offer. We don't change our philosophy. We don't change our spiritual practices. We have integrity. We very honestly present who we really are. But a deep concern for the comfort, the convenience, to use Prabhupada's words, is a sign of compassion. It's a sign of affection. It's a sign of being a friend and not just a lord to those for whom you are responsible. And that's why Prabhupada says, for example, in his purport to the Bhagavatam 4.8.54, that we should make all adjustments, take all risks. And he keeps using this word convenient to present Krishna consciousness in a way that is convenient for people. And India, actually, I've just come to Mumbai and now I'm here in Ujjain, and it's actually very inspiring to come and see so many good devotees, so many good programs. And of course, I'm grateful. I've been treated very nicely, to say the least. And so it's a real inspiration. There was a time when the movement was flourishing in the Western world, and Prabhupada's hope was to try to duplicate in India what he had done in the West. And of course, it was a real struggle back then. It was so difficult back then to make Indian devotees that during the Indira Gandhi's emergency, when she became a dictator, and it was actually very dangerous to oppose her. I mean, literally, it could cost you your life. So during that time, Prabhupada arranged a meeting with Indira Gandhi. And of course, it was a big deal, and there was a lot of tension. And the one thing Prabhupada asked her was, please give me visas for my Western disciples, because otherwise the movement in India would collapse. Because of historical conditions, it was so difficult to make good Indian devotees back then. Now, of course, India is the inspiration for the Western world, in the sense that we can only dream of having so many good devotees and so many good programs in the Western world now. And Prabhupada says a key to that is not compromising, obviously, our basic teachings or practices, but doing everything humanly possible to make Krishna consciousness, to use his word, convenient. And he specifically says in that purport that what works in India may not work in the West, and to think that everything has to be done in the West exactly as in India, this is Prabhupada speaking, he said it is an idea coming from those who are puffed up with false ideas. Those are Prabhupada's words. Puffed up with concocted ideas. To think that what works in one culture, you can simply import it exactly as is, and it works in another culture. He says those who think that way are puffed up with concocted ideas. Again, we don't change who we basically are in terms of our philosophy and practice. So that is, to me, the real spirit of this verse. Because if you look at the list here, Tokanam Pitaro, parents and children. Parents and children. The parents are the friends, the dear friends of their children, even as they protect them in a hierarchical relationship. And then you have the eyelid and the eye. The eyelid has to protect the eye. In that sense, it's serving. The husband must protect his wife. And the pati here, Lord, which Prabhupada takes here as king, protects the prajas, the citizens. The grihi, one who has a home, a householder, protects the beggars. And Prabhupada explains here we're not talking about professional beggars, but the authorized beggars. will be coming to your door later today. So the householders protect the beggars. And here, this is something which really very powerfully and directly applies to us who are trying to spread Krishna consciousness. Buddha, a person who actually has wisdom, a wise person, is the true friend, agyanam, of those of the ignorant. So it is that spirit of equality. Again, it is this is the art of devotional service, that we maintain God-given hierarchies. We maintain proper etiquette. And yet at the same time, the underlying spirit is one of equality, one of friendship. That is real Krishna consciousness. And in that spirit, we have to carry out Prabhupada's mission. So, thank you very much. Any questions on these points? Yes. Contea? Is there a microphone back there?
Thank you, Maharaj. So fortunately, in our movement, hierarchy has never been misused. If it was misused, what form could it take?
You were being facetious? I think. Okay, what is it? Well, obviously, Prabhupada said the basic disease of the soul that brings us to the material world is the desire to lord it over. And so, if you have a propensity to lord it over other people, ISKCON is your place. In the sense that here you have this God-given hierarchy. And I remember, if I can tell a story at my own expense in a rare display of humility, I remember the first time I was actually put in charge of other people in ISKCON. I was a new devotee. We didn't use the word bhakta back then, but I think I'd been in the movement about 3 weeks, and these two guys joined these hippies. We shaved their head. We almost had to hire a truck to take their hair away. So we shaved up these hippies, and then I was told to take them or walk with them from our temple on Durant Avenue, beautiful temple, down to Telegraph Avenue, which is the main student street in Berkeley. It's about, it was maybe a block and a half. And as we started walking, I think in the first 20 seconds, I probably gave them about 15 instructions. It's like they weren't walking properly, or they weren't. Obviously I went crazy, and so you can see that. Because I was coming from a background where I lived in a world where no one had that kind of divine power. Like, I was Krishna's representative. You can't go to God unless you satisfy me. I am the gatekeeper to your salvation. That can be a very strong drug. Praghosh, you want to say something about this? Okay. So in any spiritual movement, any religion, you have sort of unequaled opportunities to believe yourself to be great. Like, I'm God's gift to this world. I have the highest authority. Even kings and presidents are nothing compared to me because I represent God. Obviously, a pure soul, a sincere soul, can use that authority for good, like Prabhupada did. And as Prabhupada's sincere followers do, that authority can and should be used to save the world. But if someone is, just like if someone is inclined to eat and you join ISKCON, you're in the right place. Because, whatever else we can do or can't do, we certainly know how to eat. And so obviously when you join the movement, it's not that you stop eating, it's just that you now eat prasadam. And so if we have, as we all do to some extent, unless we're completely pure souls, we all have to some extent the propensity to lord it over others. And so if you're in a hierarchical situation, and if I can't control that propensity, then I will exploit the person under me. Like parents that want to live through their children, or gurus who actually enjoy telling other people what to do, or temple presidents, or GBC, or sannyasis, or anyone, Sankirtan leader, anyone who has a position of authority and still has a propensity to think that I'm better than other people and is not wise enough to control that will end up using that situation for their own enjoyment, and then it becomes an abuse of authority, more or less. So that's why I believe that to keep our hierarchies healthy, because there has to be hierarchy. You can't have a civilized society unless you have hierarchy, unless you have structure. But to keep that hierarchy healthy, there has to be a real awareness of and a real emphasis on the fact that ultimately as souls, no matter what kind of body we have, we are all equal. Yes, Pragosh Prabhu.
Following on from the first question, it seems that Srila Prabhupada was perfect in the balance between hierarchy and love. And we see that he established that hierarchy so strongly, so clearly, and maintained it so perfectly. At the same time, we see in his personal interactions with devotees and non-devotees, in all situations, he seemed to always be offering and giving love and respect and all of those qualities. So, as a parent of 2 children, I think the first one got a bit of a, well, I was going to say a raw deal, but got a bit of an extreme deal. It was like, particularly from the mother, there was extreme love, because it's the first baby that she's ever had, and it's like a little sniffle, and she thinks he's going to have a cardiac arrest or whatever, so it's to the hospital, just with a little runny nose. On the other side, as he got older, if he was stepping out of line, the father's thinking, oh, I have to discipline, I have to make sure this kid doesn't... So they get that kind of extreme thing like that because it's the first time. Whereas the second child, the third child, the fourth child, you've more experience. So you tend to get that balance better in terms of hierarchy, discipline, and love, and all of that kind of thing. So ISKCON, when Srila Prabhupada physically departed, we all were kind of new to this. And it seems that maybe we lent a little bit too much on the hierarchy side, a little bit not so much on the love side like that. But maybe, as time is passing, that balance is coming together a little bit more. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, you were generous to say we went a little bit too far in hierarchy. It's, yeah, definitely. And that's the direction we need to move in. I mean, as we become more mature, as we become more advanced in Krishna consciousness, where we have genuine love, as Prabhupada did. I mean, Prabhupada's the Acharya, founder Acharya. Prabhupada, and for example, I was in so much awe of Prabhupada when I was young. It was only years later when I remembered my meetings with Prabhupada that I realized how friendly he was. He was actually always joking with me. I mean, I was always awestruck, and he was just joking and being very, And one time I remember I went into Prabhupada's room in Los Angeles, and because I was very reverential, and Prabhupada almost mocked my gravity, and he said, "So, what is your message?" And then he took a flower and said, "Here, take this flower." One time I went into Prabhupada's room in the Brooklyn Temple, and that was just a little while after I took sannyas. I was traveling with, is Bear Krishna here? Yeah, Bear Krishna was the best time of his life when he traveled with me. So we flew to New York to see Prabhupada, and when I went into Prabhupada's room, he had just finished a big breakfast. And so Prabhupada said to me, "Oh, Hridaynanda Maharaj, you are traveling and preaching. I just sit here and eat." So Prabhupada was also, about what you said, I remember that at that very famous Bhagavad Dharma festival in 1972 in New Vrindavan, Janmashtami, and a young reporter from the New York Times came to interview Prabhupada. So I was sitting right there next to them, and I had a very powerful experience because, as this the reporter, of course, was he was respectful, but he was a mundane reporter, and he was asking Prabhupada questions, and I could actually see Prabhupada almost like physically just like removing the layers of his false ego and just like speaking directly to his soul. And I saw how the reporter reacted, and because he was asking questions, and Prabhupada was saying things like, "So why don't you surrender to Krishna?" But Prabhupada could do that because he was actually speaking directly to that person's soul. I mean, we can't imitate. I remember when I first joined the movement, I was in Berkeley, and my temple commander was teaching me how to sell incense on the street, an essential skill for a bhakti yogi. So he was kind of like a real performer, and so he would say, "Watch, it's really easy." And he would almost like dance up to these people on the street, and he would like put the incense under their nose like that. And they would buy it. That was cheat. So he said, "Now you do it." And I was just like this new doer. So then and of course for me, it was so, I don't do things like that. I didn't want to sell things. So I tried it. I put the incense under someone's nose, and this guy almost punched me in the face, because the way it... So in that sense, we can't imitate Prabhupada, but he had, because he had no envy, and because he actually directly reached people's souls, he could say all kinds of things, and people accepted it. Yes, Lokanath.
Prabhupada was advised by another Indian preacher in New York that this is not India, this is America, vegetarianism. Not talk about two things, vegetarianism and the sadhu attire, the clothing. You will not be in business here. But Prabhupada stuck to that. I was wondering, what is something that works in India would not work in America? Yeah, something.
The devil's in the details. Interestingly, we can see how Krishna moved heaven and earth for Prabhupada. Because if you look at the time, Prabhupada actually formally incorporated ISKCON in 1966. In 65, he's in Butler, Pennsylvania, like, where am I? My God, it's a vacuum cleaner. So, then Prabhupada, he figured out that the world revolution probably wouldn't start in Butler, Pennsylvania, with no offense to Butler, Pennsylvania. I'm sure there's nice people there. And so then he went to New York, and then when he finally sort of got a stable situation, he was in the right place, he got a place to stay, and he founded ISKCON. So that was 66, and then his last preaching tour to the West was 76. So during that 10-year period, every historian knows it was an amazingly anomalous period in Western history, when practically the biggest fad was Indian gurus. I remember selling books at universities in the United States, and they have all these activity boards, where people post little flyers, and half of them were for gurus, celebrity gurus. And so Krishna created this amazing situation for Prabhupada. And of course, Prabhupada was a real thing. Prabhupada was a genuine article, and he took advantage and spread his movement. And the other most popular gurus, like, this does not constitute an endorsement, Maharishi, or that, was it Guru Maharaji, these different people, they also used, traditional Indian robes and so on. I don't know if they were all vegetarian, but no, Prabhupada was very, very strict about principles. In fact, what was so amazing about Prabhupada is he had this perfect balance of being very strict and very lenient. So, for example, if you look at his conversation with Allen Ginsberg, Prabhupada protests energetically that, no, I never said you have to eat Indian food. I never said you have to use Indian dress. So Prabhupada could, on the one hand, preserve the tradition, and then again you have a quote from Prabhupada saying, if I thought, or if I concluded, that I could spread this movement better with other dress, I would change my dress. That's Prabhupada speaking. It's a quote from Prabhupada. Another quote from Prabhupada is, dress is a dead thing. We don't care about dress. We care about consciousness. So Prabhupada preserved everything that was important in the tradition. He preserved his own dignity. He came to this world, and this is who I am, and this is what I do. And at the same time, he made amazing adjustments. So, for example, one way to look at the adjustments Prabhupada made is to see all the things he was criticized for. All these stupid criticisms, such as the fact that he invited women to participate, which in India, for some people who are obviously not the best and the brightest, it was a scandal. And Prabhupada actually, as a defender of women, as the best friend to women, personally accepted all kinds of abuse and criticism in order to give women the opportunity to practice Krishna consciousness. And he was also, one time when I was Prabhupada's, stayed with Prabhupada 1 month in 1976 in Mayapur, and we were walking together on the roof, and he sort of told me the latest stupid criticism, which was that some people were saying that, criticizing Prabhupada because he was flying around on jets, flying around the world. He wasn't walking like Lord Chaitanya. And so, Prabhupada, I remember he said to me, should I be a fool and just, imitate Mahaprabhu? Or should I take the jet? So, in many ways, Prabhupada was an innovator. As far as today, I have my own views on what is needed. Of course, they're not very well known because I'm not inclined to speak out publicly, but I do have my views based on my study of the history of religions, what works historically in terms of social science, Prabhupada's own instructions. For example, in the Bhagavatam, you twice find this phrase, Desha Kala Vibhaga Vit, which means a knower of the differences of time and place. And you find it once in the first canto, in glorification of Bhishma, who was said to be such a person. And then, perhaps even more importantly for us, in the fourth canto, chapter 8, verse 54, when Narada is instructing Dhruva Maharaj, and when Dhruva runs away from home, and Narada tells Dhruva, you should worship the Lord, Desha Kala Vibhaga Vit, knowing the differences between in Desha Kala, place and time. And so in his purport, Prabhupada says we should take all risks, make all adjustments, so that Krishna consciousness is comfortable for Western people. Now, this is not spiritual siddhanta. To say that you should dress like this or dress like that, this is not siddhanta. It's not in the list that Rupa Goswami gives in chapter 6 of the Nectar Devotion. He gives a list of basic principles you can't change. It's not in the list. These are details. These are details of devotional service. And I'll tell a Prabhupada story as a way to answer your question and avoid further trouble for myself. In 1976, in January, I flew to Los Angeles to be with Prabhupada, to see Prabhupada, and Tamal Krishna Goswami also flew there. And this was January, right after the December Marathon, which, those of you who were there, back then, the December Marathon was the Super Bowl. It was a Super Bowl and the World Series, all put together. So, for the first time, someone defeated Radha Damodar in the December Marathon, which was my Latin American zone, which had grown so quickly. To be honest, Radha Damodar, man for man, did a lot more than us. they only had like 100 brahmacharis, and I had this huge zone that was just growing explosively in Latin America, and so we had a lot more people. But no one knew we had so many people. So anyway, we flew to Los Angeles, and we were walking in that park on the cliffs in Santa Monica. Anyway, I'll just tell you very quickly that story. Prabhupada had his routine. Prabhupada, one day Venice Beach, one day Rancho Park. I had this great experience of driving in a Rolls Royce with Prabhupada. Karundar, who was a leader then, he had a Grihasta business where he would buy late model Rolls Royces, kind of fix them up and resell them. So whenever Prabhupada came, he would have this really nice Rolls Royce. So I found myself, by Krishna's arrangement, the back seat, sitting next to Prabhupada in a Rolls Royce, driving through these really nice neighborhoods where I grew up, literally driving past houses where I went to parties when I was a teenager. And with Prabhupada, it was very interesting. And then going to Rancho Park and walking with Prabhupada, literally walking over my Little League baseball diamonds and walking past the tennis courts, walking by the pool where I learned to swim. And I could see Krishna was just like, it's like like recording over a tape, where you get. But anyway, so, oh my God, what was I going to say? I got so much absorbed in that. Oh, yes, thank you. He does know me better than I know myself. So.
I'm working on knowing myself. That's enough for me. Go ahead.
So, when we were doing that big book marathon, that famous book marathon where they completed the Chaitanya Charitamrita and I think maybe the 5th canto in just like a month or something. So I was there. I just started Spanish BBT, so I wanted to do a marathon also. So we got out the Unabridged Gita and the Krishna book, first volume and everything. And so we were just literally, everyone was working around the clock. You would literally just work until you literally fell on the ground and you just sleep. And then when you woke up, you start working again. And then, of course, we had to chant around. So I would go to Santa Monica, this beautiful park on these cliffs overlooking the ocean, and I would just walk up and down the park till I got my rounds done. So I said to Radha Vallabha, remember Radha Vallabha, who's in charge of Prabhupada's walk, we should take Prabhupada there. And he kept telling me, no, Prabhupada doesn't want to go there, because I think it took like an extra 4 or 5 minutes to get there in the car. And he kept refusing, and I kept nagging him. So finally he said, okay, we'll go one time, and then you'll see that Prabhupada doesn't like it. So we got in the car, everyone drove there. Prabhupada got out, and when Prabhupada wanted to really make a point, on his walks, a lot of times he would stop and like put his cane down and make a point. So Prabhupada stopped after a few steps and looked around and said, this is the best place to walk in Los Angeles. And that was it. He never went back to Rancho Park or Venice Beach. So in January, we were actually walking at that park with Prabhupada. And Tamal Krishna was on one side and I was on the other side. And Prabhupada was great. It's like, he was in addition to being a pure devotee, he's really a great guy, if you know what I mean. He was just really a good person. He had all good qualities. So we were walking with Prabhupada, and he was like, in his own way of talking, he was like saying to Tamal, hey, he beat you. Are you going to take that? That's really what he was saying. He was saying like, so, no one could defeat Radha Damodar, but he defeated you. So what are you going to do now? So then, and then of course we were all laughing. Tamal and I were laughing, and Prabhupada was laughing. And so then Prabhupada stopped and he said, I never forgot this, he said, I like this competition. I never forgot that. I like this competition. Because he saw that Tamal and I were like brothers, we were friends, and because of that competition, obviously, we did much, much more than we would have done. In the December marathon, Tamal would actually call me up in Mexico. And in those days, in ISKCON, you didn't make long distance, you didn't make international calls. You didn't do something like that. It was too expensive. Tamal would call me up. He would say, you're going to lose. We're going to beat you. There's no way you're going to win. Anyway, so Prabhupada was actually encouraging this friendly competition. He said, I like this competition. And so in a sense, what I think we should do, rather than me declare here that the best way to spread the movement is this or that, I've said that enough times, too many times for many people, but I think the real point here is that in a spirit of Krishna consciousness, that we're all one spiritual family, we should go out and have the kind of transcendental competition that Prabhupada loved. With mutual respect, with Vaishnava etiquette, let's go out and try to prove our theories. Because if we look at Prabhupada's instructions, we find very clearly that Prabhupada brilliantly gave every sincere soul what they need to be inspired in his service. Prabhupada not only knew, the soul of individuals, he knew the nature of people in general. And what Prabhupada knew is actually confirmed by modern science. And that is, neurologically, some people are just kind of like born liberals. Some people are kind of born conservatives. They're even like wired that way. And I'm not, by this, I'm not trying to give the idea of psychological or neurological determinism. I'm not saying that people don't have free will, they don't choose, that people can't change based on their intelligence. I'm simply saying that some people are inclined towards certain approaches. So, Prabhupada said, I like this competition. So in a Krishna conscious spirit, let's all go out and do our best to spread this movement. I'm focused on the Western world because Prabhupada focused me on the Western world. I use the word West, this nasty word, to name a project. I got it from Prabhupada, Paschatya Desha Tarine. I actually got the idea from Prabhupada. So, one time in 1972, when I took sannyas, the GBC met. In those days, there was no annual meeting. Whenever Prabhupada felt that the GBC needed to meet, he would just send the word out and everybody would just fly in wherever Prabhupada was. The first annual meeting was 1974. It says 75 on the GBC website, but it's actually 74. So Prabhupada called the GBC in 1972 because there were just different things he wanted to talk about. And the GBC took advantage of it to kind of redraw the map and reassign zones. That was in Los Angeles, and that was a time that Bhagavan left his zone in the Midwest United States and went to Southern Europe, and anyway, there were different adjustments. And so in that spirit of kind of reassigning zones, the GBC voted that I should go to India to preach. And so I thought, okay. But when they the system was that after a GBC meeting, they would always go to Prabhupada after every session, read him the resolutions, and he would just say yes, no, maybe, talk about it more, or whatever. So when they got to that resolution that I should go to India, Prabhupada said, no, what will he do in India? He let him stay in the West. So, yes. So Prabhupada, one time I asked Prabhupada if I could leave my preaching in America and go to another part of the world, and Prabhupada's answer was, yes, we can preach in heaven or in hell. And so Prabhupada often would use judo on us, and that is, we were so young and passionate, we'd go into Prabhupada's room, Prabhupada, we'd just tell him something. And so if Prabhupada saw we were too passionate about something, he would just say, all right, and then we'd calm down. And the next day, he'd tell me what he really wanted. And so that's what happened. I went into Prabhupada's room, Prabhupada, can I do this or that? He said, all right, whatever. And then because that's when I asked him to go to some other part of the world. The next day, we were driving to Venice Beach. I was sitting in the car next to Prabhupada, and the whole way down to the beach, down Venice Boulevard, he was hammering me like, America is the most important country. I came to your country. If America becomes Krishna conscious, the whole world will become Krishna conscious. The whole way down to the beach. He was talking about that. So by the time we finally got there and parked, and devotees were running over to open Prabhupada's door, I said, well, Prabhupada, if America is so important, maybe I should stay here. And he said, yes. So I had the honor of having Prabhupada use judo on me. And so let's compete. Let's compete in the way that pleased Prabhupada, because he said, I like this competition. We all worship the same master. We all follow the same principles. And so let's just all go out and do those of us who have that devotional service, let's go out and see what we can do for Prabhupada. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna.